All right. Good night. Good night. Good evening, wherever you're at. Uh, it's the conversation.
Yes, sir.
Tonight is, yep, Tuesday night. Of course, we got a dynamic program for you tonight. We got lots to talk about, especially in this nomination and election season in the run up to the regional and general elections. Of course, make sure you join tonight's conversation. It's going to be pretty interesting. We're hoping to have the watchdog from all the way in the US, Mr. Thomas Anderson. He's going to be dropping in. We're hoping to have representatives from the People's Progressive Party as well, Mr. Malcolm Ferreira and Mr. James Bond. Of course, we've been reaching out to all the other political parties to have them come on the program and, of course, talk about what their policies are because we've been talking a lot about policies and what we want to see. And but just before we get too deep into the conversation, we got to say a big shout out to the guys in New York City. We open to be joined as well by Selector Sherwin, our other co-host on the panel to have these discussions red hot this evening. But before we get into it, Martin, the disclaimer, please, bro.
All right. And the disclaimers read: the views, opinions, and statements expressed on the conversation are solely those of the hosts and individual guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of our advertisers, Majestic Music Radio, Gem Radio, or Gem Network. The content of this show is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. Listeners' discretion is advised. Neither the station nor the network assumes any responsibility or liability for the accuracy, completeness, or validity of the information presented. All content
Mhm.
is subject to change without prior notice. But as always, we say, Google it, please.
Yep, always Google it or, do some research. That's something that we always, encourage people to do. Do
Yes,
that research, you know, to get a little bit more au fait with what exactly is going on around you. Do some
mm,
more research. Of course, as the disclaimer mentioned, viewers' discretion is advised tonight because we're gonna have some videos that are gonna be aired, um, but we're gonna be airing them in their rawest form
correct, correct.
because you
This is
know
not radio.
right, and we don't want people to feel that we've edited out anything or we're
Hmm.
trying to make it all friendly. No, we're just trying to give you the raw facts as they go along. Well, let's kick it off talking about what happened on nomination day.
Yes.
Um, a lot of parties turned up for nomination day. Um, there was a lot of noise, commotion. The two major parties had mhm, had a big thing going on. The PPP, they had quite a crowd in the city.
Somebody said it thought it was in carnival.
Yeah, well, right. It was in carnival mode. Um, we saw, as some people described it, the red tsunami,
Hmm.
and then there was also a sizable contingent for the Green Party, which is APNU, well, not AFC, but APNU,
Hmm.
the PNC, and all the other little parties that are with them. Uh, they also came through. The AFC is doing the elections by themselves, not in a coalition with the PNC. So they were also there. Um, Amanzo Waldron Nazir and her party, as well as the other small party. What's the name of that one? Simona Broom's party.
Her name never landed and sit in my head. Actually, it's right here.
Yeah,
Assembly for
yeah.
Liberty,
Assembly for
right?
Liberty. Right. I always
Yes,
try to
and
remember it.
prosperity. Sorry, Assembly for Liberty and Prosperity. As soon as I opened
Yeah.
social media, it was there.
Well, I was trying to remember it, but somehow like I don't know. It don't stick. I
Yeah,
mean, I try
it
my
is still a
best.
little churchy to me, and I don't really follow the whole aspect of those.
All right. Well, um, we've got Mr. Thomas Anderson. He's already here. So we'll bring him up. so we can start kicking off this discussion about the nomination day, what
Yeah.
happened. And of course, there was a lot of questions that came up from the reporters. They basically tackled everybody, in my
Mhm.
estimation, because I was looking at coverage from Newsroom, I was looking at the coverage from iNews, I took in the coverage from the Guyanese Critic. I also took in a lot of the coverage sporadically from people on their independent lives that were looking at what was going on nomination day. Um, for me, it was pretty. It was most most of it was pretty orderly. If we didn't have a lot of you know too much hustle and people screaming and shouting, although there was a lot of noise and what they call those trumpets that keep blowing
Them
in the
horn,
background.
them blue
Right,
horn.
right, the horns. They had a lot of that. But all in all, it was a very orderly process. I looked at what Claudette Singh, who is the head of the GCOM, what she had to say about, for example, a revamping of some of the rules
Mhm.
that need to be, of course, updated. I mean, we're talking about GCOM, and the rules from GCOM are like since colonial time.
Mm.
The way elections are running at. So definitely we have to look at upgrading the way it happens. One of the things I heard mentioned is that the SOPs from each area, in order to make the election more transparent, those every time an SOP comes out, that declaration will be posted immediately or
Mm.
almost immediately, so that people also on the outside can make their count. I also noticed there were several observers on the ground um, while the nomination process was going on. People were bringing in their candidate lists and all that into the Umanayana. The observers were there. They were having a keen look at the entire process, which I think the members of the Carter Center, because I was looking at facial expressions, and I think the members of the Carter Center were wondering. I mean, they didn't change it from 1992 since we were here last. I mean, they were here all the time, right? But they did the process, the entire process ain't changed from since back then. We know this. All right.
Mhm.
So I mean, I could see the smiles on their faces. They're like, okay, this process is not it's not upgraded. It's just the same way that we saw it in 1992. So we're hoping that as we go on, as Claudette Singh said. But one of the things I do believe is that there should be referendum to change the laws, the legal system, so
Yep.
that of course we can have a better electoral system. All right. So let's bring up Mr. Thomas Anderson, um, also to give us a bit of information on what his thoughts were looking at the process, um, and of course what his thoughts were when each party came out after they submitted their list, and the reporters started to ask questions about policies and stuff like that. So bring up Mr. Thomas. How are you tonight, sir?
Hey, I'm great. Hey, great to be back on again.
Greetings, brother.
Quizzy and Martin, man, you guys are great. Thanks for having me on again.
Thanks,
Of
bro.
course.
I'm glad that you had that time as well, because I know you're a busy guy. You had the time to join again. Your thoughts on nomination day in terms of what was going on with everybody taking in their list to the Umanayana, the process.
Well, this is the first time I've looked at it from beginning to end, right?
Yeah.
And I was pretty surprised. I thought nomination day was going to be like a little boring, whatever day, but it was actually a lot of energy. It was exciting.
Mhm.
It was a good look for the nation of Guyana. I thought, it's something unique that other
Uh-huh.
countries don't do. I mean, maybe other countries do it and I just don't know, but this seems very unique to me. Um, and it's really exciting, and it's just something that, to me, it showed that the electoral process is still intact in Guyana. There's still a real opportunity. The people still believe in the system, is what it showed to me. And so
Yeah.
I thought it was a really good look for the people of Guyana.
And of course, I mean, outside of that, because I thought myself it was a pretty orderly process. It went along. at first it seemed a little chaotic because when you looked at the mass droves of people coming in from all angles, it started to look like it was going to be a bit confusing. But I got to commend the Guyana police force. They made sure that they put up the barriers in every area. They made sure they manned each entrance point where people were coming in. And they were very clear on, listen, reporters are already in. They made a decision on who was going to be those reporters inside. And they restricted the crowd, so it wasn't extremely chaotic. But the chaos remained outside of the barrier, which I thought was a good look. But of course, the nominees, after they submitted their list, they came out. I noticed that the PPP, the General Secretary, Bar Jagdeo, and Irfan Ali, as well as Mustafa, the General Secretary of the PPP, he was there as well. They submitted their list, and then they exited the Umana Yana, of course, to questions by the reporters. All right. Some of the questions that were asked, although I did notice that in asking the questions, President Jagdeo was very, let's say, he attempted to control what was said. All right, I noticed that, and that is being a very shrewd politician. I mean, I can't knock him for putting his party's information out there, because he started by saying what policies the government has implemented and what they want to do in the future. All right, which I thought was a good thing, because people want to know what every party is bringing to the table in terms of what people are going to be voting for. Are we going to be voting for the same old policies, or are we going to have some movement on these policies? Now, the other parties as well, they all came out to the press. But one of the things that kind of caught me, that was really, surprising, was the questions that were posed to the new party that's now involved, the Win Party. And, the head of that party basically really fumbled in delivering or answering the questions. And it seemed a bit chaotic, because the campaign manager was standing behind him. He had a few other party comrades alongside him, and they were trying to interject while questions were being asked directly to him. What were your thoughts on that, though? I mean, lots of people got thoughts. I got my own thoughts on it. But what were your thoughts on it? And of course, Martin, we've got another member, another person who has joined us as well. I'm not quite sure if it's Mr. Ferrero or Mr. Bond, but they're supposed to be joining us as well. Could you bring him up on stage, please? Yes. Good night, Mr. Bond.
Greetings, brother.
Hey, what's up? What's up, man?
Yes. All right. Good to have you here tonight, my brother, because we're talking about nomination day, what happened. Well, I don't know if you know Mr. Anderson.
Hello, Mr. Bond.
Mr.
Nice to meet you.
This is Mr. Bond.
Hi, Mr. Anderson. Hi.
All right.
Hello.
Now, my question, Mr. Bond, I know you just joined, but we're jumping straight into the questions and how people felt about what was going on the ground with the reporters, and when, for example, each political head exited the Umana Yana, and certain questions were asked to the head of the Win Party. And I was just mentioning, it seemed a bit confusing, because people were asking, for example, could you give us an idea of one of your policies that you're going to be bringing to the table that's going to be different to what the present administration has put forward? And we didn't hear much. I think it was Dr. Mark France that says they're going to focus on agriculture and the diversification of agriculture. But again, I'll tailor that question to Mr. Thomas. What were your thoughts on listening to the new party and interacting with the media and the reporters at that time?
Well, yeah. Thanks again for having me on, guys, and thanks for coming on, Mr. Bond. Nice to meet you, man. Look, when it comes to Azardine Muhammad and the Win Party, he had to have known that he would be asked questions. This isn't the first, nomination day that he's seen in his life, so he had to have known he'd be asked questions, and to be asked some simple questions, by the way, for his response to be what we call, in the States, the deer in the headlights look. I mean, the dude, his eyes, he had shades, but you could tell, but underneath those shades, his eyes were bugged out, and he had to breathe a little, and he was nervous when he said, "Oh, shortly," like, he he didn't seem ready, man. He didn't seem ready at all, and that's a big deal because we're not talking about, Guyana in 2010. We're talking about Guyana in the year 2025. And the Guyana that exists in the year 2025 is one in which, Guyana is now a pivotal piece in the geopolitical scheme of things around the world for several reasons. For several reasons, not just because of the oil, by the way. It's also because you've got a neighbor in Venezuela that's this guy Maduro is smuggling everything he can out of the Amazon jungle.
Yeah.
And if he can, he'll go ahead and smuggle everything out of Guyana as well. And so that's a huge geopolitical issue. And you've got now countries from all over the world looking like, well, this is going to be a food fight over here. And when you have a situation like that, and there's an election, and you're running for president, man, you need to be up on everything. You need to be sharp. You need to show that you know the issues. There can't be any doubt, and it's not because of the voters in Guyana. They don't care if you don't know. His supporters don't care. It's not even about that. What it's about is it's sending a message to the world that, hey, the potential next president of Guyana doesn't know anything about what's going on in the country. Oh man, let's go rip them off. That's the message it sends. And so it's a message of weakness, and it's not good. So I don't know what he's going to do, but he had a great opportunity to show that he had a grasp of the issues and that he's an impressive guy. And instead, all he could just say is, "Give me time. Give me time." I mean, there is no time. It's 2025. You either do it now or you don't. I don't know what's going on now with this guy. I mean, I was surprised.
I was surprised because what I thought was going to happen, I thought, I mean, if you're involved in the elections, in the process, you're submitted your symbol, you're going to be involved in the election. I think at that point you should start doing your research, or your team, as he says he has his team, should have started, at least formulating what they were going to do, what they were going to talk about, who was going to say what. Because if for example, if he doesn't know how to answer certain basic questions, then the rest of the team should have been prepared to answer those questions. James, I don't know if it's you, but do you have some background noise in your area?
Boy, I'm at the bar, right? And it's normally quiet on a Tuesday. But my friend just came and told me that today is his birthday. And he got some car playing music in front there.
Okay.
So if you're hearing the music or whatever, that's the car in front of the premises. Banging music, man.
I'm hoping it's not
normally
going to
very quiet here. Normally quiet here, Tuesday.
I'm just hoping we don't get any copyright strikes because of the background music. That's what I'm trying to avoid.
I don't think it's that audible.
All right. But the question that I asked earlier to Mr. Thomas, that question goes to you as well, Bond, because what Martin and I and our team have been trying to do, we've reached out to the opposition participants as well. We try to have them on the program to ask questions, like, we ask them questions. What are their policies moving forward? But we haven't been able to get them. Hopefully, next Tuesday we may have some of them on board. But we're hoping to have them. We sent them letters as well. But what were your thoughts for nomination day so far?
Our nomination day was excellent all around. Um, I had experiences at about three nominations day before, and this is by far the most spectacular. This is by far, in terms of just turnout, the sheer numbers.
Yeah.
It was the largest ever, and all the parties that contested, I think it bodes well for our democracy. I like seeing this. This is not about being partisan, but I like seeing Guyanese involved in the political process.
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
uninvolved and it's peaceful. It was orderly. There
Hmm.
was no ruckus. Everyone was so excited, even after nomination, when our party went at the railway station, the former railway station, and the vice president, the prime minister, and the president gave speeches. People didn't want to go home.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
had to like beg people to go home.
Hmm.
Um, Persons brought their coolers with their drinks and their food. It would have turned into a carnival atmosphere if they did
Atmosphere.
not tell people to go home.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that it was a totally a good look for democracy, and I like seeing the smaller parties involved, and that was good. But one thing
Yeah.
for sure, the diversity of the PPP is what stood out for me. As I
Hmm.
walked amongst the people, I saw Guyanese of all walks of life. I saw vendors, I saw bus drivers, I saw about seven lawyers, about five doctors, economists, you name it, I saw them in our ranks.
Yeah.
Men, women, even children,
Yeah. I
even
know this.
children. I
I mean,
walked the full length. I walked the full length going to and the full length going back.
yeah.
You know, the only upsetting part that I wore these shoes, my Chelsea boots, and my feet were sore, man. But this this experience was totally in the PPP's favor. It shows their diversity. It shows their experience. It shows their balance. Um,
Hmm.
when you could be led by the greatest politician, and this is party. This is not the president's time, so to speak. No, it's when the party kicks in, and the
Yeah.
general secretary Bar Jack, he's the leader for the party. And when you could see a party being led by, I call him the greatest politician in the Caribbean right now,
Yeah.
and he's marshaling his troops, and everything is at a tempo. Everything is it is no letting up. It is almost as if they're not the incumbent. It's as if they have something to prove. They work hard. They put in the work in terms of bringing all this development together. Now they have something to prove that they could get the final job done, which is winning the elections.
Hmm.
So when I saw his leadership from start to finish,
Yeah.
I'm like, this will be, I think, one of the largest victories since 1992. We've had
All right.
questionable elections in the past, but this will definitely
Well,
be the largest.
honestly, I have heard of a larger one, which was kind of like way back in 1954 when it was just the PPP. There was no strike
Just the
off.
PPP, but I'm saying post 1992.
Right. It
1992,
was
this will be the
large.
largest
But
margin of victory.
yeah, but on a side to that, James, the president of Guyana on the stage in Kitty said a particular thing that kind of perked up my ears. When he started talking about investment in culture and investment in the creatives, as you know, that is a sector that Martin and I are always invested in because of what we do. And we've always been calling for improved IP laws, updated IP laws, and the enforcement of those laws. One of the things that we also said in the run up to elections is that we'd be encouraging the creatives in Linden, the creatives in Berbice, the creatives in Georgetown, to come together and lobby with one voice, saying that we want to see on any political party's manifesto, not that they're going to look at the issue of IP law, but they're going to actually move forward in ensuring that not only we're properly rejoining the Berne and Paris Accord, but we also pick up on our contributions, because we've been lacking in that contribution since 1974.
Mm-hmm.
So when I talk about my ears being perked up, when I heard the president talk about investing in culture and investing in the creatives, and immediately I thought about, I said, okay, once I have somebody from the PPP on, I'm going to ask them a question in terms of, is that going to be a part of the PPP's 2025 manifesto?
Well, I haven't seen the manifesto yet, and I can't pronounce the manifesto, but I could tell you this. If the president says it, he'll do it. I could tell you that. He's a man of his word. And culture is very, very high on his agenda from 2025 going forward. They knew that they had to lay the groundwork in certain areas, um, health, infrastructure, um, education, etc. But they also know that the heartbeat, the heart blood of a nation is culture. Yeah, the lifeblood of a nation is its culture. And our Guyanese culture, what is authentically Guyanese, is something that we had it, and it has waned. You know, things like the kwekwe, things like our poetry or drama arts or music. I don't think we have sought to protect and invest in it as we
Our
should.
IP.
I don't think there's enough spaces in which we could train. There's enough spaces in which we could have workshops. There's enough spaces where we could have that exposure for creative arts. And then comes the issue of monetization. I think what was the fear back then is that was the key issue, monetization. But now that we have uh, the resources in which we could monetize the sector, we could monetize training, we could monetize these workshops, we could monetize uh, scholarships, we could monetize so many things. We could even monetize subsidies for creatives, um, persons who write, persons who do music and drama. They could be entitled to subsidies. And this is something that, as you may not know, but I was nominated for the Ghana Prize. I'm a poet. I've written 2 manuscripts, and I've just had discussions with Dr. David Dabadine. And our head is where culture needs to take center stage. Uh, our
All right.
culture needs to take center
Take
stage.
center stage. Now, one of the things I just wanted to interject here, James, I've been lobbying the government to look at the IP issue for quite a few years. And I do understand the international structure of how we move forward. I've discussed it or several times on my radio program, where I've mentioned the fact that, although the government is invested in the creative sector, it is not a sector, for example, where you can just say, okay, like randomly, the minister of culture says, okay, I'm going to establish some studios. Now, that's a good initiative, but my question to him would be, why would you establish studios when there are already private studios that have been working with the artists, have been putting out music? All right. Why not upgrade those studios to international standards where they can mix and master and they can record at a certain level? And then, if later on down the line, if those studios are not, coming up to scratch, then you may want to think about that. But shouldn't it be the investment in the people who are already on the ground putting in that work?
Um, Let me just step back a bit. Let me just step away as a politician, as a creative. Let me speak as a creative.
Please.
There are certain areas in which I wouldn't even have government touch. There are certain things I would have grow organically. Having its government should have its own studios in which it does its programs, in which it shoots its films, and the film industry, something that's dying, is almost dead in Guyana. We could
The
you could
advertising
have
sector is
that.
dead.
You could have that as from a government perspective to handle government stuff for Gina. But
Yep.
if we're gonna think about how developing the music industry, that can't be government driven. That can't be, because
Nope.
for me it has to be freedom. It has to be free, and you
Yep.
don't want someone to say, "Oh, you can't sing this song or you can't write this." You want the artist to be free to express, to be creative. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so for me, as myself, I write songs. Cassidy could tell you, I wrote a number of songs, sing gospel for a number of years. For me, I don't want to see
Yeah.
a government in that sector. I would like to see the government away from that. Reduce the VAT on these on the equipment. One, that's one way to think to assist. Offer
Mm-hmm.
grants. You have these business grants, offer grants and soft loans to
Mm-hmm.
artists, and that's about it. You don't have to use taxpayers' money to build a studio.
Well,
You
many
could pay
suggest.
for the training. You could have a scholarship program in which you send persons overseas to learn sound engineering and all these things. But stay away from building studios and getting involved in
Well,
what should
well,
be generally a private sector.
I just wanted to interject with what you were saying. Um, in my estimation, the government's job is really to create the enabling environment.
Environment, yes, yes, yes,
All right,
yes.
where
It's not to
the
compete with the private
creatives,
sector.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, all the creatives. I'm not. My focus may start with the music industry, but the music industry is just a very small sector of the creative industries, because as you mentioned earlier, poetry is part of that. Writing, the people who create the short films, the movies, the documentaries, all of that is part of what should be happening. Now, on aside from that, one of the things that I want to see happen is, for example, with the Broadcast Commission, in the issuance of these licensing to television stations, radio stations, um, are they? I'm wondering if the for example, the ruling party and the opposition parties that are coming to vie for to be part of the government, if they're going to be looking at, okay, how do we open an entire sector, an entire industry in Guyana that involves the people? All right, because we hear a lot about people-centered policies and stuff like that. So if these policies are people centered, I'm thinking, okay, the Broadcast Commission should know about, for example, piracy that's happening across the board. All right. All the radio stations in Guyana pirate, all the TV stations in Guyana pirate. Um, is there going to be a closer look, because that is where really the creative sector comes in, and we're being hampered. And we're talking about across the board, because you have a lot of these guys in Sophia, in Linden, in what we call the depressed areas, that they're very creative. You would agree they're very creative in those areas. But how are how are these parties or the government going to look at creating an enabling environment? All right, because why I mentioned the Broadcast Commission and the piracy is because basically they're supposed to be issuing a license that says, okay, if you're gonna get a license, 50% of your content must come from home, whether it's television or radio. All right. So when I hear about, okay, development, people oriented policies and all these the political um jargons, as I would say, I'm looking at, are they looking at how to change what is already happening on the ground?
Yeah. Well, you see, that landscape has been shaped um, for decades, and I'm with you on this particular issue. I think we've had a number of conversations on it.
Yeah.
I'm with you on it because I think it is one of the ways in which we could alleviate poverty. It is one way we could empower more Guyanese, and
Mm-hmm.
it is something, like I said before, that has become entrenched. And as you know, piracy is an illegality,
Of
but it has
course.
become entrenched. So to now break out of that, if you understand Machiavellian politics, you can't just break out or remove a strong man abruptly. There has to
Mm-hmm.
be a gradual shifting, and
Mm-hmm.
like I said, it has to come from a position where the Guyanese artists or a Guyanese voice or voices
Mm-hmm.
advocate for something like this. Because you see, a lot of persons are not culturally inclined. They're for the other bread and butter issues, wages and salaries and security and healthcare and education. Not everyone is culturally inclined, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're losing the battle. We're
Mm-hmm.
losing the battle in terms of how our society is cultured.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example of what I think is happening and
Yeah.
why we need the advocacy. When you look at some sections of young people, you know, you could see that some sections have completely lost their way. They've never heard of Martin Carter. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they've, they,
They've
they,
never
they,
heard of Louise Bennett.
you name them, they've never heard of them.
Mm-hmm.
They've probably never don't whoever Ezzy Rockcliffe is. I don't think
Yeah.
a lot of Guyanese know our cultural songs, our national songs.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a section of our population that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know these things.
But
Um,
right, when 1 second, James, when you mention national songs, right, I have to mention this. The song that one of our biggest national songs, as they say, right? This land is my land. All right. Now, I pointed this out to several people, and I really was trying to get to
that they
the
culturally
Ministry of.
appropriated.
No, that the song is a plagiarized song. The song was written and released in
Culturally
1945.
appropriated because I don't like to use plagiarized. I like to say it was culturally appropriated.
Well,
It's an
well,
American
well, bro.
song.
Okay. You would describe it as that, but I would describe it as plagiarism because we had no permission to change Rudy Guthrie's song to what it is in Guyana today and then call it a national song. So I believe we have to look at the fundamental. The fundamental is the plagiarism that came in and was entrenched in the minds of Guyanese. That is what needs to be erased, and them have an understanding that, listen, that's not part of our initial culture. It was something that was plagiarized. Or else,
Yeah,
moving forward,
I think, no, but question, all due respect, I think that is a storm in a teacup. I think at the end of the day that we have um, a considerable amount of material
yeah,
in which we could define as our culture.
yeah,
This
we
land is
do.
my land is just one of 10 billion or 1 in 10 million. It's
Yeah,
minuscule, but we do have enough material in which we could define who we are culturally.
yeah,
We
that's true.
have we have the six races. Well, if you want to leave out the mix, you got the five races who are authentically original,
Yeah.
authentically real, and authentically Guyanese.
Yeah, that's a fact.
You know,
That's a
and
fact.
that is the foundation on which I would build. You know, that's the foundation on which I would build, and I try to ensure that the stakeholders not only play
Hmm.
a part but benefit. Because at the end of the day, a workman is worthy of his hire. You know, at the end of the
Hmm.
day, you're devoting time, energy, and your talent
Yeah.
in terms of your art, in terms of your sculptures, you know, your prose and poetry and film and docu-series. When last have we produced a docu-series or a
Well,
documentary? Forget documentary, docu-series. When last have we had an autobiography of one of our greats? You see, Koyan is 100 now or thereabouts. Um, and we still have people like Kit Nascimento around. We still have Hamilton Green around. You know, we have a lot of people who could, at a particular time, and David Granger is also a fantastic historian.
hmm
Who we have people around in which we could easily do a documentary or a docu series of a particular period,
hmm
from the 40s to the 50s to the 60s, easily. We ain't gonna go to the
easily.
70s. You know, I'm a 70s baby. I could probably talk about the 80s and 70s.
Well, I just wanted to, by talking about the IP, I just wanted to kind of get an idea of, if the PPP is looking at that, because I did mention that President Ali mentioned it on stage. I haven't heard any mention of really the creative development from any other party. But I know Mr. Thomas has a couple of ideas. I see him looking intensely, listening intensely as well. So, Mr. Thomas, what are your thoughts on this particular topic? Just on aside from nomination day, we're talking a little bit on what policies can really create new industries in Guyana. Like,
Well,
for
yeah.
example, with IP.
Yeah, well, to me, I think where the disconnect is happening is the government is having a hard time creating a system where there's clear rules of the road that
Hmm.
everybody has to follow, and that the government is adamant about enforcing. That to
Hmm.
me is the biggest problem. So you can have a bunch of good ideas, but if the government doesn't set up, a system where everybody who gets involved into, let's say, the music business, they all
Yeah.
know the rules of the road. Everybody knows. They may not be fair rules, they may not be the rules people like, but they are consistent rules. Everybody knows them, and the government adheres to them and enforces them evenly, regardless of who you are. That to me is the bigger issue at hand. Is, can the government implement such a system and adhere to it to make sure that all of the stakeholders can have confidence that,
Yeah, and
okay,
benefit from it.
exactly, because if you don't have the confidence, then you're never going to get the real investment money, right? And that's what
Hmm.
you want, and that's the only way to get the big, big, big investment money, is that the investors have a pretty good idea they're going to get their money back with a little bit with a little bit
On
of
the
a
top.
return, right?
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but if there's no real infrastructure in place and the government isn't enforcing the rules equally across the board, well,
Hmm.
then you as an investor can put all the money you want in. You can get all the best talent in Guyana. You can run your business perfectly, and you will go out of business. And the
Yeah.
reason why you'll go out of business is because the system is set up so that you can't do well, and you can't do well in that industry if you're not doing other things, right? And so I think that's the biggest issue.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I also wanted to talk about was this system, because James, a lot of people have said to both myself and Martin, um, they believe people are saying they want a change because they don't understand that it's not really a change
Hmm.
of government, but a change of the system that needs to happen. Now, you have been on basically on both sides. You've been in parliament. You know certain rules of the parliament. Could you give us an idea? Because a lot of people have been asking, are we going to have a referendum at some point to change those laws that are so archaic? So,
Well, some of the
uh,
laws you don't need a referendum to change. Some of the laws could
hmm,
be changed by a simple majority. The copyright law. in particular, is a simple majority could change that. You do not need a referendum. The referendum mainly comes into play when you're trying to change a constitution.
Yeah.
That's when you normally get a referendum.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of these things, Quincy, it just takes political will. And I'm glad you mentioned when I was in Parliament, and that's what I recognized in my formative years in politics. I just see the regional chairman trying to call me here, boy. I'm supposed to be in Northwest tomorrow speaking at a meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, so in Parliament, I realized in my formative years is that a lot of the political parties they lack a political will on political issues, on certain political issues, on certain things they move.
I think that call actually coming in back.
They
Yeah,
move and
yeah.
move right away. But
Mm-hmm.
on other
Oh,
Your audio gone, James.
the audio is gone, James. I think somebody's trying to call him, and that's knocking off the audio. I don't know if are you hearing us, bro?
To be at that meeting tomorrow.
Yeah. But those are some of the things that James, are you back? You hearing us? Because your phone is muted.
No. All right, let me set it in the background.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Malachi. Continue.
Yeah. One of the things that we wanted to have some clarity on in terms of policies moving forward. This is why I kind of brought up the IP issue, was to really kind of figure out where the parties were thinking in terms of creating a new industry that can, again, like James mentioned too, and I keep saying this, and myself and Martin mentioned this, these are parts of poverty alleviation strategies which help to grow a nation. All right. I did mention a lot of the creative talents that are in the areas that people would say they are the downtrodden areas or whatever. But a lot of creative people come from those environments, and they need to have an enabling environment so that they can function and they can benefit from as well. I do believe that, if we strengthen the enabling environment and the policy making, and of course the upgrade of the IP law and the enforcement thereof, because without the enforcement is a poodle without teeth or a pit bull without teeth.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have the enforcement, which is a critical part of that, to be done. But just on the side, I just wanted to know what were the policies about, what the development was going to be, where it was going, because I did hear the president talk about, investing in the creatives. And
all right, before we switch out, right?
Yeah.
So I think at this point, everybody would know this is my first time paying close attention to politics, right? My first time actually going to be voting. Now, I mentioned the last time, somebody like me is a bit confused on who to vote for, because I personally am looking for certain things. I got a family. I'm a father of 4, right?
Mhm.
So I looking for things for me and my children, right? While I could benefit in America and I could stay in America, I'm a born Guyanese. So I'm always going to be returning home. I even started remigrating back home. So
Yeah.
I'm looking at things where I could benefit, and by extension, the family. And of course, once we could benefit, I think the rest of the country is able to see the same line and benefit the same way, right?
Yeah.
Especially in the creative space. Now, when it comes to politics and the creative aspect of things, I noticed we paid attention to the writers, the musicians, the movies and things. I get tired talking about the really and truly, right? Because a lot of politicians would focus on the creative aspect and just the music and just the studio and just the thing. Now, I look at business,
Yeah.
the branding of business, right?
Yeah.
Whereby,
Patents, trademarks, all
correct.
that.
Now, the reason I got tired of looking at the creative space and the entertainment, even though that's where I'm focused on, and I started looking at businesses, because all the politicians would come out and say, oh, yes, we have to look at the creative, and the creative have to come out and speak up and whatever. All of that could happen and we still wouldn't get nowhere. We haven't gotten anywhere. And that is facts. I'm looking at the agriculture sector. I'm looking at the housing sector. I'm looking at all the other development, everything else except music and entertainment. How is it the country, by extension, the government is able to function without copyright in all of these sectors and just blame everything on the creative? That would be one of my major concerns and questions, right? For our politician friend to answer. And if we're focusing on agriculture, we have the medical field by extension that comes with that, right? If we're focusing on all the development that has been happening, all the roads, all the hospitals, all the branding, all the businesses, and even to zoom in a little bit, Banks DIH last year, or early this year, boasted that they made $10 billion in profit, right? After taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying, well, perfect, that is good. But then months ago, they're complaining how a small company in New York is thieving the IC brand. And they're claiming they're not in business with that partner. So I'm saying, well, if you're one of the biggest beverage countries in Guyana, and I would want to say the Caribbean, but I think they will be competing with the ones in Trinidad, right?
Yeah.
But we're known for certain things. So after your 10 billion profit, you're still going to complain, even though you have copyright in the UK, but you don't have it in Guyana. But you're still able to be successful and then complain that your IC beverage is being stolen in the US. Don't you think that we need copyright laws in Guyana?
Oh, I don't know what happened. I think Mr. Bond got disconnected. Maybe that call came in again.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one of the big issues, that's a burning one that we picked up on. The loss of Pepper Pot, Banks complaining about, IC, the brand being used by another company in the US. Pepper Pot, the loss of Pepper Pot, the loss of Demerara, that kind of stuff. I mean, the IP law issue can basically extend and goes across the board with a lot of issues in Guyana. And I'm just thinking in the run-up to the elections, because this is where, if you're not focusing on infrastructure that much in the next 5 years, what are we really focusing on? And Martin and I have always been lobbying for the focus on the youth and the creatives, all right? And we do believe that that's an entirely new sector that once it has been properly invested in and guided, all right? Because again, we need that in the enabling environment. It can be one of the biggest money earners for Guyana, because the artists will leave Guyana to perform. They get paid large sums of money. They're not going to spend it there. They're going to come back home and they're going to spend that money at home. So that also contributes to Guyana's development, the growth, and contributes to our GDP as well. All right. All right. So that was just on the side from, the initial topic that we were talking about on nomination day and stuff like that. But there's been a lot of crazy stuff happening on the ground in Guyana since nomination day. I just want to play a video from a woman who, just to give you an idea, on the ground nomination day, a lady says she's endorsing the AFC. And this is what she had to say.
I feel great today because it's nomination day and I would be voting for Mr. Hughes, Nigel Hughes, because better must come in this country. And the only way better could come is by placing the X against the AFC.
Interesting. That's a very interesting, supporter for the AFC. I thought that was a very interesting clip that I saw online as somebody supporting the AFC. Um, but Martin, what are your thoughts on the smaller parties and going into nomination day? What has really come out of it all? Because you're a first time voter, you're going to be a first time voter soon. So, what are your thoughts on the smaller parties, not the incumbents or the major opposition party?
So I've been a little bit educated. I ain't the brightest in the bunch, but just a little bit educated. The smaller parties should have had the common sense and the decency to do better. Right? Understand the small. But if you're working towards a common goal, which all the parties should have been working towards a common goal, but if you say you're working towards a common goal and you're still going on the list as a small party, I think you're wasting your time at this point. Because what you expect to do, right? And this is, of course, to, I don't even know if I should call him. I believe at the end of the day, there were 7 parties that would have submitted their list successfully.
Yeah. It started off with what? It started off with what? 28?
Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Right? But to have 7, my predictions, we're gonna have 4 officially in the just before September 1st. And that would be the PPP, of course, APNU, Win, unfortunately, and I for some reason I believe Forward Guyana is gonna still be forward in, right? But I am looking at everybody, especially the smaller ones, and I'm saying, well, aren't y'all supposed to be working to get in a coalition or coalisting, as they would say, for the betterment of the country, for the betterment of the people? Because if I have little to no trust in the major parties already, then how could I even look to you for guidance? That's like me not listening to my mother and still can't listen to my friend. Because I know my friend can guide me down the wrong road. And my mother telling me something, but this still can't work out for me.
Well, I don't know. I think that the smaller parties had enough time to kind of look at each other's agenda, what policies they were going to bring to the table, and come together. As many of the political pundits out there have said, I mean, there's no need for us to have. And I think I saw 2 persons go into the Umanayana, and they were just single, one person representing the party, the prime minister, the presidential candidate, everything. I tend to agree with Claudette saying that really the laws need to change to kind of weed out that kind of, the one man chaotic party kind of thing. Because I don't understand how they think that one person can do that. I know it sounds kind of off the chain.
Hence me not having no faith in them. Right?
Yeah, but I mean, to me, it looks like they're strategizing for, coalescing post-election, right? And what they're looking to do, the smaller parties, is they're looking to cut a deal, right? And so I think what they're doing as smaller parties is they're going to see who gets the most votes out of the smaller ones, and the ones who get the most votes, they're going to be the ones with the most leverage to coalesce with either APNU or the PPP, right? And so that's how. So the election is going to come down to who these small parties partner up with, I think, and that's where I think all of this changes, and I think that's what the small parties are trying to do, right? Because it actually makes it, almost like 2 elections, basically, where you have the one election, and then after things coming through, these smaller parties decide to coalesce with either the PPP or APNU, and that will change the election results, right? So, so that's to me looks like the strategy.
Well, trust me. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have said. Some people have said, Win is going to after elections. They're going to go coalesce with the PPP because, of course, Mohammed was and his dad were a part of the PPP for some time. Some people are saying, okay, well, the smaller parties are going to coalesce with Win and APNU to kind of make sure that they get more than 50% in the parliament. So the government will then become a majority government in parliament.
That's I think that's the strategy. Right?
Well, I mean, it's kind of plain to see. It's kind of out there that that's the strategy. However, the outlook of a lot of these parties as it stands presently, it's not a good look. When I say not a good look, I don't know if because Win is a young party and they really don't have a campaign, not only manager, but somebody who's a strategist, because that's one of the things you must have as a political party. You must have a strategist, somebody with a brain to strategize what your moves are. Now, why I said that is because we have also two videos, which we're gonna play them, and of course, viewers' discretion is advised for those parents who may have children in looking at this with them. Just ask them to step out of the room for a minute. But we're gonna play two little clips of some of the stuff that kind of emerged from the new party, and I'm thinking that, listen, it happens with the bigger parties as well. But if you're coming into the political arena fresh, all right, certain things you don't want to be happening at all, especially with your supporters and your overall political image out there. You got to look at how that is delivered to not only the people in Guyana, but to the diaspora as well. All right. So, Martin, let's play the first video. And this video kind of shows one of Win's. I don't know if he's the campaign manager or he's the organizer, but I would give him the position of an organizer because he's able to organize and mobilize individuals in a very short space of time. So let's play that video, Martin, and I will discuss this particular one when Mr. Thomas sees this video. All right. Wow. Okay. So that was an incident that was caught on camera a few hours ago, where, of course, you heard the name being called. Doggy was assaulting a member of the Win Party after, they basically were asked to come to Coffee Square to collect whatever monies they were promised for, for their activities on nomination day. And you had guns out, you had a gun out. A young lady was being assaulted by Doggy with the gun. He's now under arrest, thanks to the Guyana police force. But I mean, what are your thoughts, guys, on this type of behavior for a relatively new party coming in to the elections game?
Well, I can tell you, I've been myself just examining the support that I see Azruddin Muhammad get in the Win Party, and the best I can quantify the best I can wrap my mind around it, like what's going on. is simple, right? He's reaching out to people who feel as if life in Guyana has not been fair to them, that they've been overlooked, they've been spit on,
marginalized.
they've been exactly right. Like no one pays attention to a lot of these people way out in the far reaches of Guyana, right? No one's paying attention. And so what's happened is these people are, in my opinion, they're almost living under a form of economic sanctions, right? In their everyday life. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's not I'm not saying that the government's oppressing them or anything like that. What I'm saying is because of how the nation has been growing, you've got a population of people now who are not educated very well, right? They don't have very many opportunities. And when you have the combination of lack of education, lack of opportunity, that's almost a type of economic sanction. And so from their perspective, when people when people say, oh, you're the guy that you support, he's under US sanctions, they don't care, because for them, whether he's on sanctions or not, whether the entire country's under sanctions or not, their situation is not going to change. The only thing that can change their situation is Azruddin Muhammad coming to them and saying, I'm going to give you whatever you want. That's the only thing that can change their plight from their perspective. And if I'm looking at it from an outsider's point of view, and I'm saying, well, I can see how from their perspective, they look at it like, okay, no one here can help me but Azruddin Muhammad. And I get that he's helping me because he's trying to help himself. But from their perspective, it's like they have no other options. And so he's their man, and they're going to ride or die with him. And that's just it. So I think that's how I wrap my mind around it. And I think this activity kind of explains it, because these people aren't really out here for Guyana. They're not in the win party to make Guyana a great country. They're in the win party to get what they want. Right. And for a lot of them, it's respect. It's respect. A lot of them just want respect. A lot of them want an opportunity. A lot of them want a fair shot at living, a good life in Guyana. And from their perspective, it's like, oh, you know what? There's no difference between me and all of those PPP supporters who are all living good, and I'm not living good. The only difference is Jagdeo and Irfan Ali just give them a bunch of money. So I need my guy to give me a bunch of money. I think that's what it's coming down to. Okay?
I think that's a perception. I think that's a perception, because a lot of people have done a particular thing, and if they've not done it before, it's not the first time people have actually crossed the floor and gone over from, let's say, from any political party to the PPP.
Yeah.
But one of the things I could tell you, which was pretty laughable for me a few times when I saw it, was they have that mentality as well, that listen, if I go over, somehow they're gonna find a way to make sure that some money comes to my pocket. All right. Not really understanding that, listen, you're in the political party, yes. However, that only allows you to know individuals in the party. For example, the ministers and stuff like that. They're not gonna do you any favors. They're not going to do anything for you. They're not going to hand you some money. All right. So you have got to have a plan. And this is what I keep saying to a lot of our Black youth. Making decisions on who you vote for is very critical, because who you vote for, they have to demonstrate that they are creating, as I said earlier, that enabling environment that you can function in. Because, for example, if we have a bunch of creatives, which we do, and there is no enabling environment for them to grow, then you have what we see happening now. We have people calling themselves scrapes.
Yep.
All right. And out of those same people, we know a lot of those people have talent in terms of the music, in terms of designing, and all of that. But there needs to be that enabling environment. And one of the things I do believe that all the politicians need to look at is creating that enabling environment, instead of saying, oh, well, when I become president, or when I'm in the position, I can then look at that. And this is why I'm saying, no, the youth of Guyana have got to say, what is your policy?
Mm-hmm.
What are your policies going in that will create an enabling environment so that I can live? I don't want to be marginalized.
And Kwesi, I got to tell you, there's a huge opportunity for the nation of Guyana in the youth, okay? Because any investment made into the youth is going to come back to Guyana tenfold. So it's just like there's a massive opportunity. I think the Azzuddin Mohammed candidacy has opened up some eyes a little for people to realize, oh, you know what, we've got a pretty big marginalized population going on here, and they're not happy, and they're consciously siding with the guy that they know isn't the best guy, but it's in their minds as marginalized people, it's the only shot. It's their Hail Mary, right? And so that's a message. That's the message I take from it, and I'm hoping other politicians of APNU, of APNU, of the PPP, of the AFC, I hope the other politicians take this same lesson actually and realize, hey, you know what? We're one country. And we really need to go out for these marginalized groups, and we really need to make a concerted effort to go and create the type of environments, especially economically, that the young people of Guyana need. And I'll tell you, one of the ideas I've had, and I've been telling people this, and I think it's something that, you know, the country of Guyana could really take advantage of. And I think of cryptocurrency. I look at the college students in Guyana, and I just say to myself, you know, why doesn't the government give every college student a cryptocurrency wallet, and every quarter put some cryptocurrency in there for them as long as they're enrolled? And as soon as they graduate from college, they can graduate from college with their degree, but they also get that cryptocurrency wallet. And
that's an excellent idea,
right?
But we do not have the implementation of the Swift money banking system.
See?
That's a huge issue.
Okay, there we go. So this is the type of stuff, in order to unlock the potential that Guyana has, the country has to get on the Swift banking system. The country has to get in a position to be able to transact in cryptocurrency in a major way, especially for people who are marginalized. That's a way to bring banking to marginalized populations way out in nowhere. You could easily bring them banking if you have a pretty good cryptocurrency set up in your country. And here's the thing. There are companies and individuals around the world that if they hear, oh, the nation of Guyana wants to set up, you know, a system of cryptocurrency, especially for those who don't have banking, that are out in the middle of nowhere, I'm telling you, it's there. They will flock here to Guyana to help the government set up the scenario so that the government can get into that. But that's what it takes is it takes for the world to see that the people of Guyana are in this mindset, that they're in the mindset of living in the modern times and trying to create and implement different economic strategies that fit the present day and the future. And that's stuff like cryptocurrency, right? And so I just think the young people need to be plugged in on that. I think the government needs to do a huge focus there. But at the end of the day, if they don't get serious about it and they don't really start reaching out, this groundswell of anger.
Look, I love that idea of the crypto, but like I mentioned earlier, that Swift money banking system is not here. And we still haven't, I don't think we've fully hurdled the AMLTF, or the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Act. All right, we those are like, I think two hurdles that we got to climb over.
That's easy to get over, though. You know how you get over that, right?
Well, we know how to get over that, but we also have, like, for example, in the space.
Well, like, by the way, I don't think you'll get over it with Azzuddin Mohammed as president.
I was just going to mention, it's very difficult to hurdle that. It's very difficult to hurdle that with a sanctioned individual.
Yes,
that's in the space.
Almost impossible.
Like, right?
Probably not.
I mean, so to me, that's a crisis situation.
Well, you know what? Him being a presidential candidate actually hurts the nation in this sector, because it makes people think who are in the money laundering, enforcement area, well, they've got sanctioned people running for president and they don't care, right? Like that's how it looks from the outside, and it's like, whoa, that type of situation, if a nation looks like, oh, they celebrate smuggling and stuff, it's going to make these guys go, well, we need to double check their application because something's going on. So that's the other thing I don't think people realize, is that the impact on the image of Guyana that Azzuddin Mohammed has put on the country, it's actually a big impact from the outside looking in. It actually makes people on the outside say, whoa, what's going on down there? That place is kind of wild to have a guy like that running for president. What's up with that? So I think that's along these lines. The challenges that Guyana faces, actually, Azzuddin Mohammed is probably the worst guy for president to deal with the challenges Guyana faces, because a lot of these challenges are ones that dip into the international community, and that's one where this guy just can't operate in.
Well, I did mention to a few people that I mean, it's difficult with individual that has been sanctioned being in the space in order for us to do certain things. I think this is why the ruling government says, listen, he can't be in this space because it's going to affect Guyana not only financially. This is why, for example, his certain license for businesses that he had in Guyana were revoked. I don't think people fully grasp. And I think later on, for example, the people who have signed on with his list of nominees and stuff like that, I mean, later on, people are going to see that, listen, OFAC and these other American agencies are not playing games, including where we had statements or tweets from U.S. Congress individuals who mentioned that, hey, this guy is linked to Maduro. He's a puppet of Maduro. All right. A lot of people believe that somehow the government paid a lobbying firm in the U.S. to get those senators to say that or to tweet that. And I'm trying to, with all I have in me, I'm trying to explain to them that lobby firms are there for any country to hire, any political party, any business to hire,
any individual, individual.
They lobby. Now, lobbyist firms operate under rules as well. They just can't say anything and do anything, right? And there is no way that, for example, the FBI, the Homeland Security, OFAC, and the DEA would have ongoing investigations on an individual. And, they will just say, oh, well, whatever is happening, he should be allowed free reign. All right. That is going to obviously be up to us as Guyanese to understand the ramifications of what is going to happen if who we decide, okay, this individual is going to be representing Guyana. So I have been trying to explain, not from a perspective of, oh, nobody should care about the gentleman, but we should care about what the international bodies are saying about him. Because one of the things I try to point out to a lot of people, that those investigations were not started when President Ali came to power. They were started before he got in there. And the results or the information that was then handed over or came out in, let's say, the Reuters news report, was long after the investigation had a lot of information on him that they were able to divulge that information at that time. So that's to kind of give people a greater perspective on, listen, this is not something that the government of Guyana could implement on this guy. This is stuff that is implemented, and it's an international thing. It prevents your banking from happening. You can't go on flights because those airlines are linked to the same banking institutions internationally. there's several ways in which you're going to be cut off.
Yep.
And for those individuals, for example, who are on the list of, this individual, they also have to be careful with their interactions, because I do believe once their names and stuff are all published, people are going to say, listen, I want to distance myself from these individuals, because that's going to create issues for me.
Mm-hmm.
And people, I think Guyanese tend to look at it as just a visa issue. They're like, oh, if we lose the visa, so what?
Yeah.
But I want you to kind of elaborate that it's just not the visas alone.
Yeah. So
that is going to be affected.
So first off, the type of sanctions that Azzuddin Mohammed is under are called the comprehensive sanctions, and that's that list of comprehensive sanctioned individuals. That's only for like drug lords, terrorists, the worst of the worst, money launderers, gold smugglers, the worst of the worst. That's who gets the comprehensive sanctions, because those sanctions, when they come from the Treasury Department of the United States of America, it's backed by all of the financial institutions in the free world. It's not just the Treasury Department saying Azzuddin Mohammed. It's all of the banks, all the financial. They're all 100% backing what the Treasury is doing. So when you have a situation like that, that can put your country, if a person under comprehensive sanctions becomes the leader of a country, that's going to put the country at risk. Period. Everyone thinks, oh no, it's just him as an individual. No, because as an individual, as a leader, he's going to try to find ways to still do business. And if he does business through the government of Guyana, then the government of Guyana is going to end up under sanctions in whatever way he tries it. And so that's how that works. And it's very, very serious. Now, when it comes to the lobbying firm that the government of Guyana hired, so that situation there is very, for people to understand why a nation would hire a lobbying firm. Here's the reason why.
Yeah.
So when a nation like Guyana has to communicate with the United States government, not about life, threatening issues like, oh, there's a nuclear bomb next door, not huge things, but things that are very important, like for example, hey, we think we might have a security issue with our neighbor Maduro. Like, he's saying that he wants to take most of our country. When they want to communicate what they know to the U.S. government about that situation, they've got to get a lobbying firm. And the reason why is because there's no phone number that Jack Dale or Irfan can pick up to call the U.S. government and say, hey, this is what's going on. They can't do that. So how does the U.S. government, how do specific individuals in the U.S. government find out what's really going on in Guyana when the government of Guyana is trying to communicate? Well, it's through these lobbyists. And so one of the issues that came up with this, and that lobbying firm, when they're communicating to member of Congress, they're not communicating like what the government of Guyana is telling them to say. That's not what's happening. What's happening is the government of Guyana is telling the lobbyists, hey man, we've got a problem with Maduro. We're hiring you to communicate with the U.S. government for us about these issues with Maduro. Here's $50,000 a month. Please make sure no stone is left unturned. Please make sure that you do everything in your power to protect our interests, because this is a dangerous situation with this guy right here. When that firm, when they're told this, and they've got a job to do now, right? What ends up happening is you get a guy like Azzuddin Mohammed, and the day after Maduro found out that his election didn't work in taking Essequibo, the day after that, Azzuddin Mohammed announces his run for president. Now,
which is pretty interesting.
That's a very interesting timing. Okay. When that happens, of course, there are going to be international alarm bells going off with that situation, because people are saying, oh, wait a minute, part of the way that Maduro is trying to interfere with Guyana is he's trying to come in through these sectors where Azzuddin Mohammed and his family do gold mining. He's trying to come in through there. And he's trying to bring his smugglers into Guyana to smuggle for him so he can continue to stack his paper, right? And so when you see that situation, you see this guy a day after Maduro couldn't take Essequibo through a vote. Now Azzuddin Mohammed's running for president. Okay, well, this is a problem. This is told to the lobbying firm. The lobbying firm then, they have their own professionals that they've hired.
Yep.
People who are former DEA, former FBI, former CIA, former diplomats, former politicians, all of that. They hire these guys and they say to them, hey, our client, the government of Guyana, has told us they've got a serious issue with Maduro. We need you guys. We're going to pay you guys to do all the research, reach out to everybody you know, come back to us with a report to let us know like what these guys are really facing. They did that. The report came back, and the report came back to the lobbying firm saying that Azzuddin Mohammed is a puppet of Maduro. That's what the report said. Now, people can say that, that wasn't good work, and whoever they hired, they weren't that good. People can say that, but I'm telling you, they probably hired some of the best people around, more than likely, okay? And that report said what it said, and once the lobbying firm has that report, now they have the responsibility to go to the U.S. government to represent their client and say, hey, we've done the research, we've paid the experts, and we're telling you, U.S. government, there is a serious problem with Maduro down there, and there's a serious problem with this guy named Azzuddin Mohammed who's under sanctions and running for president. Once that's told to individuals in our government, that's it. They're not going to debate it. They're not going to ask, well, is this report legitimate that you
is got? It legitimate?
No. I mean, they're going to say, we got to move because this is too big of a problem. It's in our backyard. It's Maduro. Let's deal with it now. That's how this happened. Okay. And everything I'm describing right now had nothing to do with the government of Guyana. They don't get involved in this stuff. This is outside of their purview. This is all happening in America, but it has to happen this way because if it doesn't happen this way, there's no phone to pick up to tell anybody what's going on.
Well, I'm hoping that tonight really kind of ventilates that particular issue on the lobbying firms and stuff, because on social media there's so much flying around. Although I've taken information, just the information that you've mentioned, and I've posted that on social media for people to kind of get a greater understanding that, listen, this is not the way it works. Guyana cannot tell the U.S. government what to do and who to sanction and all of that. Those things are all international. When it does come down on an individual and that individual is still free and moving around, incidentally, my point I wanted to get to was I heard him I don't know if he was addressing a rally or something, but he said he wanted to have the FBI come in. He promised that if he won as president, he would let the FBI come in to do a thorough investigation of the Adriana Young case. And I'm thinking in my head, I mean, I don't know if he read the Reuters report on him and his family, but there are ongoing investigations from the DEA, ongoing investigations by OFAC and major law enforcement organizations from the U.S. So bringing the FBI in or claiming he will allow them to come in to carry out this investigation when those very people have said you have ties to criminal activity. How is that going to work out? I'm wondering, and because I'm listening to the rhetoric and I'm hearing his supporters like, yes, this is what we want. But I'm thinking that's going to affect you. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, so I think what his See, so what his entire, maneuver here is to do is he's trying to get off of sanctions. And I think he believes the only way to get off is to run for president, gain enough political power to then leverage that to get off of sanctions, right?
Okay.
And so now here's the issue that he has with that. If you look at the sanctions that came down on him and what OFAC described and what the Reuters report described, right?
Correct.
What it's describing is that he's the king octopus with all the tentacles going out and corrupting everybody within the Guyanese government. Like he's the big, him and his father are the big octopuses, and they're putting their tentacles all over the government of Guyana, and they are the ones who are creating the atmosphere of corruption. Okay, is what that's what OFAC is saying. That's what Reuters is saying. That's how the Western world is viewing the situation, right? Is that him and his father are the corruptors. Okay. Now, the only way for him to get off sanctions through this political maneuver he's making, and you'll see in the sanctions, it says, hey, we're doing this because the sanctions are about changing behavior. We're trying to get people to stop smuggling gold and start actually doing it legitimately.
Abiding by the law.
Exactly. That's the whole point of sanctions. So for him to be able, right, to get out from underneath sanctions, he's going to have to prove that he's not the octopus. Him and his father are not the octopus corrupting everyone. It's somebody else. And not only is it somebody else, but whoever else it is, they're going to give all the proof to prove it. Yeah. That's what will have to happen for him to get off of sanctions. I think the problem with that is that him and his dad are the octopus. Like they are the corruptors. Okay. And I think the government over on our side has, after all these investigations, have figured it out that these guys are the ones corrupting everything. Gotta get rid of these guys in order for Guyana to deal with the corruption problem. And the corruption problem is huge because that's what's being used by Maduro to infiltrate your country. Okay,
exactly.
That's how it's happening. And so that's what this is all coming down to, right? Is can Azruddin Muhammad pull it off, become president, and be able to prove that he's not the guy corrupting anybody, that he's a victim? And by the way, he's not going to do any more corruption anymore. He has to prove all that, and then he can get off sanctions. I think that's just way too complicated. I think it's too many moving pieces. It doesn't make sense. I like the term Occam's razor, which is the simplest answer is usually the correct answer, right?
Yeah.
And it's not always right, but I like Occam's razor. I look at this situation, I say, well, the simplest answer here is that his father early on in the 90s probably got his hooks into the government of Guyana. Okay, he just did. And through his Cambio license and through the gold licenses, he created this empire of corruption. Okay. And his son inherited it. And his son is operating this empire of corruption extending back to the 90s. Now, I've seen Nizar Muhammad say, Shell Muhammad say, oh, I regret the past things I've done and I've gone to God with it and he's forgiven me and I've moved on with my life. Okay. But the problem is those past transgressions are the things that built his empire that he's sitting on right now. Yeah, so if he's really truthful that he regrets it, well, then why are you still sitting around like a billionaire? Because the truth is, if you regret the way you got the money, maybe you shouldn't have it. If you're truly repentant and you feel like, I shouldn't have gotten this money this way, well, then why are you still trying to hold on to it?
Like a lot of people have said on social media, why does he just pay the monies back? If they said, okay, you defrauded the government of Guyana, OFAC said this, you defrauded the government of Guyana over $50 million, and you have the money, just give it back.
Because they've done so much more. This $50 million with the gold is just one aspect of what they were doing. Okay,
exactly. It's just one aspect because they're in the Reuters report. It talks about money laundering for oligarchs from Russia.
Yep, that's right.
this is outside of the gold smuggling.
Oh, and by the way, let me just tell you this, okay?
Yeah.
A French Navy vessel just docked 2 days ago.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Here's why that's huge. The guys who have been going around the world dismantling Russian corruption has been the Ukrainians. They have. They have been dismantling Russian corruption even in Africa. These guys have been in Africa dealing with the Russians. And so the French are their biggest allies. And I'm just wondering, with the French coming in a big boat like that, is it possible that the French have in their possession information that the Ukrainians have dug up that shows what the Russians are doing in Guyana? I just wonder.
Same thing I wondered, because when I saw it, I was like, why are the French here at this very critical point? Because we're at an election period. And of course, we know what they do. That group of individuals, I know what they do. So I'm like, why are they here? There must be a reason for them being here.
Yes.
As well as when the U.S. ambassador said, "Oh, we're gonna send in the some people to train the Guyanese police force for the upcoming elections, just in case there's unrest, etc., etc."
Yep.
So when I saw those things, I'm like, okay, I kind of understand what is happening. The international is looking on at what's happening and say, listen, we do not want this kind of stuff happening in our backyard.
Yep.
And I don't think a lot of people fully understand that it's not just about Guyana. It's about people's foreign investment that they have spent here.
And in other places in the region.
Yeah.
Because Guyana becoming a dysfunctional, destabilized state will ruin investment money all over the region. Okay. Yeah. And on top of that, it will spur terrorism, drug cartels, human trafficking, weapons. A destabilized Guyana creates so many problems.
It will
destabilize so many people, man. It's not funny, man. It's no joke. It's really no joke. You're talking about life and death for a lot of people if Guyana becomes a destable state. That's not. So it's not in the interest. I try to tell people this. People are like, oh, America is trying to send in police to teach the Guyana police force on how to install the government that America wants. No, our police don't know how to do that. We don't have training for installing governments. We've got no clue how to install a government. That's not not even our culture.
I think if they did, they would have done that in the U.S. Install the
exactly right. And so we don't do that. But what our police do, right? And I put a video of this. So the U.S. ambassador said, okay, we're gonna probably have Miami-Dade police officers coming to Guyana to train the Guyana police force. Well, I put up a video from December of last year where the Miami-Dade police caught a thief in a mall in Miami, and he was stealing about $1,000 worth of Nike gear, right? And they catch those guys all the time. But instead of just locking the guy up and leaving it at that, one of the police officers noticed the guy's tattoos. And he noticed that they looked like the tattoos that the feds had trained the Miami-Dade police officers on spotting Tren de Aragua gang members. Okay. So they saw the tattoos, and what do? They took pictures. They arrested the guy. They sent the photos up to the feds, and the feds go, he's wanted. He's a Tren de Aragua gang member. Good job. So these guys, possibly the cops, could have just booked them and let them loose. Instead, they went deeper because they saw the tattoos. Well, what are they going to do when they train the Guyanese police? Well, they're going to teach them, hey, man, you guys need to be looking out for these tattoos. Why? Because Tren de Aragua, they've invaded your country already. They're in Region 1. They're doing things like smuggling people and everything else. And if they are paid to create chaos on election day in Guyana, they'll do it. And so the police need to know what they're looking for. If they see a bunch of Spanish-looking guys with these tattoos on their arms, they need to know, hey, man, that's danger. That's Tren de Aragua. Right?
That group kind of like reminds me of one of the real bad gangs, the the MS-13, the
Yeah,
Manasalva
that's
Tutor
right.
gang.
They're an
Yeah,
international crime syndicate. And
correct.
you know who else deals with them? The French have to deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
Spain deals with them. There are so many countries that have to deal with those guys. And if you look at the way that warfare is being fought now, this hybrid type warfare,
Yeah.
having a gang like that at Maduro's disposal, basically almost, where he can pay
Mm-hmm.
them to wreak havoc on his neighbor, it's not a far stretch to see that happening, actually, because
No,
war is
it's
heading
not.
in that direction. We're fighting with drones now. Everything is hybrid warfare. It's
Yeah.
not traditional. It's not just, line up your tanks and fire at each other and see who survives. That's not
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
going on
Yeah.
here. This is way more complicated.
It's infiltration. It's all
Yes,
kinds of stuff.
right.
It's subversion.
Psyops, disinformation campaigns, all of
Mhm.
this stuff is happening. And so that's why the French warship is there.
Yeah.
That's why the Miami-Dade police are coming in to help train the Guyanese police force, right? Because this isn't, I think the people of Guyana are so used to just the political infighting that they think that this is just the PPP versus APNU.
Yeah.
No.
Just
No.
PPP versus WIN.
This is way bigger than that. Your nation's sovereignty is at risk right now.
Correct.
You have a madman next door who wants everything you have, and he's dead set on taking it. And he's backed by the Chinese and the Russians. Okay, he is. If he wants to take Guyana, the Chinese and the Russians will say, okay, and they'll just deal with it from there. Okay, they will. They're not, the Chinese and Russians are not going to send a warship to protect Guyana. No. America has, the French have, the Canadians will, the Brits will, okay?
Yeah.
The Spanish will. But you're not going to get the Chinese or the Russians to protect Guyana. It ain't happening, okay?
Well, this is some of the stuff that, we really try to put out there. But we got like 10 minutes before we have to wrap up tonight's show. So, Martin, I know you got a couple of suggestions and questions as well from Mr. Thompson. So go right ahead just before we wrap up tonight's show.
Well, not so for Mr. Thompson, but for our people. Because as I mentioned before, I live in the US. So I am able to benefit from America, right? In my opinion, it's somewhat safe, right? I live in Miami. I'm hoping to see some comrades, that I know.
Hey, man, we need to have a beer, by the way, man. You're in Miami, man. You're right down the street. This is crazy.
I'm currently in Minnesota, but this is Miami.
Yeah.
So I see how they operate, and even when it was announced that they're going to be down, like interesting, because I know how I was trained in security by an ex-FBI. I have a couple of people ex-military from the Green Beret and these things. I have a network of trained personnel because I'm interested in the security field. And I do bodyguard service and so on. Me and Malachi provided security for Santoki, right?
Yeah, Suriname president
a couple years ago.
Yeah,
so we have a bit of understanding. As one of my good friends says, "You're in the American system." I say, "Yeah, man." Right? So I say that to say, people like me, Malachi, anybody who's not sanctioned, who don't have problems with any government at all, we could fly away. We could disappear. We don't have to worry about Guyana. Right?
Yeah.
Given that things go left. But that is not what we want. I personally want to be home any given time. Right?
And just like James mentioned, Guyana got the wild, like we are at the cusp of, the potential is limitless to what Guyana can do. Yeah.
When people tell me, oh, they're about to visit Suriname, they're gonna visit Aruba. I say, you ain't going to Guyana. You can't go nowhere else and don't go to Guyana. I have always believed that Guyana is a beautiful place.
Yeah.
Right. And it's always going to remain beautiful no matter who comes into power. But obviously, if we have chaos like we're seeing in certain neighboring countries, then we're going to suffer and everything else is going to suffer by extension. So, of course, having these discussions is to inform our people, to enlighten them. Right. And for a lot of people who've been asking, no, I ain't joining a party. I don't think I will ever join a party. Just like my forefathers, I'll most likely create my own, right? If I'm to take politics serious. But this a little enlightenment for our people is to pay attention. Of course, we've seen what happened earlier in the video we play with Dagi, right? A lot more of that
Incidentally,
is going to
sorry,
be
not to cut
happening.
you. Incidentally,
Mhm.
the Win Party has distanced themselves now from Doggy. I
In-
just
in
got
a
that
Really?
bit of
sense,
information.
in
They
a
have now
sense,
They lost their
distanced themselves.
that wasn't he supposed to be like their prime minister guy or something like that. I mean, they lost a big
Well, I guess I think he was their organizing guy because that's what he does best.
Mm.
But I think they lost their organizing guy right now.
they lost their prime minister.
Yeah, sorry, Marty. Go right.
No, but imagine that if we allow certain people to, be in power or to have any power at all, we're gonna
Yeah,
be seeing a lot more of those stuff because they said he's
Mhm.
also unlicensed. Now I'm in the security field and I know how hard it is to get a license. So for somebody who just roam in the streets without a license,
with a gun.
I mean, there's a lot more problems to come. I do hope that we don't have to face any at all and we could remain peaceful. Just now, September 1st is going to come, it's going to go on. Everybody's going to express and enjoy whatever carnival thing is happening and Christmas by extensions as they come, and we can all be one again.
Yeah,
It's just that the election does make people lose their minds. It's
especially in
like,
Guyana.
I
And
know.
we're hoping that they think sensibly because that's the
of course.
main thing.
Well, you know what though? There's a
Peace.
silent majority, I think, in Guyana,
Yeah,
and that silent majority is going to split between the two big parties, basically, right? I mean, that's just
Yeah.
the bottom line, and it's funny. I think that silent majority is really going to make a statement this election. I can. That's what I'm feeling more than anything is. I think
yeah,
the
yeah. I
silent
can feel it.
majority
Yeah,
is sick of all this noise that
Yep.
has nothing to do with what really matters.
yeah,
Correct.
yeah,
Correct.
yeah. There's a lot of noise, but nothing to do about all that noise.
Yeah.
Guys, we got to wrap it up for this evening. Make sure you check us out each and every Tuesday. We have the conversation where we bring on interesting panelists so that we can have some really good discussions and, of course, educate Guyana on especially this particular issue with, having a sanctioned individual in our whole political mix as it is presently. But just before we wrap up tonight's show, make sure you check us out tomorrow morning on Majestic Music Radio. Of course, we've got the only syndicated program from Guyana, South America, from 8 to 11 in the Caribbean and Guyana, and of course, from 1 to 4 in the UK on slamfm.co.uk, and of course, in Atlanta, New York, Canada. Check us out tomorrow for that. Mr. Thomas, so glad that you always, inform us, educate us, bring us up to scratch, and help us to educate our people, especially on this particular issue with, Mr. Muhammad and what could possibly be the ramifications of him in the space or in Guyana and being in a position of power in Guyana. Martin, the disclaimer
Anytime, by the
before-
way. I think you guys are great, man. Thank you. I mean,
Appreciate it, brother.
anytime
Appreciate
you
it.
want me on, I'm on, man. You guys are great, man. And we're having that beer, Martin, man. Next time you're in Miami, bro,
So
I'm buying. I'm buying.
you buy, don't drink. We could have a glass of wine. I'm a
Right,
classic
yeah,
guy.
he's a
Okay.
wine guy.
All
Yeah.
right,
I
let's
might
do
have
it.
that beer.
Let's do
I might
it.
have that beer. I mean, I got to fly down from New York so I can have that beer. But we can definitely
There
have
we
that beer. To all the listeners, thank you for joining us this evening. Wherever you're at, hope you had a great time. For those people in the comment section, thank you for leaving your comments. We're gonna get to those maybe tomorrow as well. But we got to get out of here. Martin, the disclaimer before we leave.
So the disclaimers reads: the views, opinions, and statements expressed on the conversation are solely those of the individual hosts and guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of our advertisers, Majestic Music Radio, Gem Radio, or Gem Network. The content of this show is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. Listeners' discretion is advised. Neither the station nor the network assumes any responsibility or liability for the accuracy, completeness, or validity of the information presented. All content is subject to change without prior notice.
All right.
That's
Love
how
your
it's
world.
going.
Love you, Guyana. One
Yes,
people, one nation,
One
one
destiny.
destiny. Love you. We out of here.